Tonight on Talking Points, General Michael Flynn pleads guilty to lying to federal investigators. He plans to cooperate with the special counsel's investigation into Russia's election meddling. Senator Lindsey Graham responds.
There is no evidence of collusion. Nobody's been charged with it, but you found the one person who would know if it did exist.
The House Ethics Panel investigates Congress following multiple claims of sexual harassment.
One of the more high-profile names under investigation is Representative John Conyers.
The allegations against Congressman Conyers, as we have learned more since Sunday, are serious, disappointing, and very credible.
No one should have to go through something like that, let alone here in Congress. So yes, I think he should resign. I think he should resign immediately.
I sat down with Syracuse professor Lee McKnight to talk Bitcoin. He calls it a crypto commodity that's built to last.
It will run as a store of value, but it will not be actually what it was set out to be, which was a virtual currency.
And the U.S. Embassy could be moving from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, breaking with decades of past foreign policy.
All that and more ahead.
This is Talking Points.
Top story tonight, breaking news out of Washington. President Trump's travel ban on 6 mainly Muslim countries is approved by the Supreme Court. I'm Josh Carney.
And I'm Mike Riccardi. President Trump's travel ban can now take full effect, according to justices who presented the decision today. The policy will ban residents of Chad, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen from traveling to the United States. The 2 dissenting votes among justices came from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor. 2 U.S. Circuit Courts of Appeals will hold arguments on the ban's legality this week. That's all we know at this point, but we'll be sure to follow this ongoing story.
Switching gears, we continue to follow more news from Washington and the special counsel's investigation into Russian election meddling. Today, President Trump came out and said his former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, does not deserve the harsh treatment he's receiving. This comes just days after Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to FBI about the contact with the U.S. ambassador to Russia. Flynn is now cooperating with the special counsel's investigation. We have Talking Points contributor Dan Prager here to discuss the implications this has on the White House. Dan, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's been an honor all year, guys.
Thanks.
Don't remind me.
As we move forward in this investigation, it was quite pivotal in terms of what Flynn was in there for, what he pled guilty to, and ultimately what he gave up. What is the significance moving forward of Flynn's testimony and the fact that he gave up the likes of Jared Kushner's and others?
Well, that's huge. If you're thinking that this is not even nearly as deep as it goes, Flynn's testimony, he's just big enough that giving up somebody like Kushner could be the real connection. A lot of people thought that this was going to be the connection to Trump and the Russians, but so far they don't have that connection. If Flynn has actually flipped and if Flynn has that information, giving up someone bigger than him could be that next or last straw.
Now, shortly after all of this came out, President Trump issued a tweet basically saying that, he had spoken to Mike Flynn and he had fired him after he lied to the president. Now, some are taking that as an obstruction of justice. Now, within this investigation itself, Dan, do you think this is being taken seriously as an obstruction of justice, or is it something they're going to move beyond?
I think it should be taken seriously and should be investigated. It wasn't Trump that actually tweeted it. It was his lawyer, John Dowd, which is important to say. But in the tweet, what's important is that he said that he knew that Michael Flynn lied to the FBI. If that's the case, when Trump fired him, he knew there was a charge against him and didn't say anything, which is obstruction of justice.
And is the legal framework for that tweet valid, though, in that light?
That's an interesting question. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I don't think on its own that's obstruction of justice. I think that's kind of ridiculous, but they're going to look more into it. An interesting thing we might see going forward is whether or not President Trump can even obstruct justice. Today, John Dowd again, Trump's lawyer, said that a president can't obstruct justice, which interestingly enough, when Bill Clinton was president, was being charged for the same thing. Who led the prosecution against him? Trump's Attorney General, Jeff Sessions.
Now, when we look at, like we said earlier, Mike Flynn outing Jared Kushner, among others, in this report. Where do you think the investigation is heading next? When they move beyond Flynn, I mean, are we just getting started, or is this investigation coming to an end almost?
We're definitely just getting started, and a lot of people on the Republican side, especially Trump, is saying that it's over. But breaking news that came out about an hour ago, Katie McFarland, the former deputy national security advisor, it turned out that she had also lied in her testimony. Some emails came out. She said to Congress that she knew nothing about any meeting between Flynn and Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, but emails said she did know. That could be a mistake, but with all the things that we've been seeing, probably not, and it's another example of why are you lying to Congress if you have nothing to hide? And that's what a lot of people who are accusing are saying.
Exactly. Those simple answers are something that everyone is wondering, and everybody kind of wants to get out of this investigation, and it certainly shows that it is only just beginning. Dan, thank you for being here, and thanks for being here all year. Up next, Byron Tollefson will break down Congress's response to the recent sexual assault allegations against members of the House and Senate. Don't go away.
You've messed up your son's haircut.
Mom?
Do you A, try to fix it,
Like it never happened.
B, work with what you got, or C, show solidarity?
Thank you, baby.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Every time I hear the alarm bell go off in school, I think it's an air raid.
A lot of houses in our neighborhood have been destroyed. I like to close my ears and sing songs whenever the bombs come close.
I'm worried our new neighbors won't like us.
But I know it's all gonna be worth it. I just want my family to be safe. But these are not my words.
These are not my words.
These are not my words.
Members of Congress, official action is being taken by the House Ethics Panel in response. Talking Points contributor Byron Tollefson is here in studio with more. Byron?
The House Ethics Panel announced Friday it's launching a wide-ranging probe into sexual harassment claims. The Ethics Committee is also investigating whether Representative John Conyers used specifically allocated taxpayer money to settle his sexual harassment dispute. And on Friday, the Washington Post reported Congressman Blake Farenthold used $84,000 taxpayer dollars to pay his sexual harassment suit. How have these congressmen been allowed to settle using taxpayer money? Well, the group that pays out these settlements is the Office of Compliance, which settles all congressional employee disputes. The office has paid more than $17 million taxpayer dollars in 268 settlements since 1997. It's unknown how many of those settlements were sexual harassment related, but following the Farenthold report, there's now a new push in Congress to ban this practice. A Republican congressman from Utah, Mia Love, introduced a bill on Friday that would end this use of taxpayer money. She said that she was outraged after hearing the Farenthold story, but none of this behavior is new. She said, and I quote, "If someone behaves badly, the consequences to those actions are that person's responsibility and no one else's."
So Byron, you mentioned John Conyers in that, and what has been the House leadership's response with regard to him?
Well, the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, has already said he should come out and resign, but the Nancy Pelosi response is pretty interesting, because when she was initially asked about it on Meet the Press by Chuck Todd, she said, "Oh, well, he's an icon. I don't really know the accusers." So that was her initial response, which isn't a quick condemnation. But eventually, she ended up saying that he should resign. It is time for him to resign. So kind of somewhat of a flip-flopper on that point.
Now, Byron, like you said, there's a new bill being introduced that basically would stop the use of taxpayer money to settle these allegations. But, I mean, how far can we expect this to go? Is there any chance that Congress is going to change the process in which they handle sexual allegations?
Well, in addition to that Mia Love quote, you also have a bill being introduced a few weeks ago by Jackie Speier, a Republican congresswoman from California, as well as Kirsten Gillibrand in the Senate. And part of that bill will ban this use of taxpayer money. In addition, it will require mandatory training by members of Congress in a survey every 2 years, which is anonymous, detailing if there's any sexual harassment going on.
Right, and the fact that there is, an effort being made in terms of kind of curtailing this behavior, what is the timeline for implementing some of these, broader programs that they want to kind of identify?
Well, that bill was actually introduced at around November 16th, so it has been some time. But more allegations that you continue to see with Farenthold, with John Conyers, Al Franken in the Senate. There should be a push relatively soon. The GOP has passed its tax reform bill, so let's see what happens, but there should be some sort of additional push to see if we'll get a vote on this relatively soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing to light such an important issue, Byron.
Thank you for having me.
And in 10 days, the FCC will vote on and likely approve a plan to repeal net neutrality. Net neutrality regulations are meant to ensure equal access to the internet. FCC Chairman Ajit Pai released his plan to roll back the Obama-era regulations 2 weeks ago. Talking Points contributor Gilat Melamed is here to explain what it means for tech companies and internet service providers. Gilat, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, obviously, this program started by the Obama administration is very new, started back in 2015.
Yes.
Why exactly does Ajit Pai and the FCC want to get rid of it after it just basically started?
Yeah, I mean, Ajit Pai, the chairman of the now majority Republican FCC with the 2 other Republicans there out of 5, they basically are saying less regulation of these internet service providers means more growth in the market. It's a typical Republican stance, so it's not surprising he feels that way. And he's basically saying, like you said, it's very recent. So prior to 2015, this is how the internet always was, this free, open internet for the service providers. And he echoed this in a statement, saying, quote, "I'm threatening our democracy. Really, I'd like to see the evidence that America's democratic institutions were threatened by a Title I framework as opposed to a Title II framework during the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, and the first 6 years of the Obama administration. Don't hold your breath, there is none." So he's basically saying he's just returning the internet to the way it was before 2015.
But what does that mean ultimately for internet service providers and tech companies? How are they going to grow if this legislation were to be passed?
Right, well, he's saying for internet service providers who are largely for this is going to allow them to grow because they can set, different price rates. There's the fast lanes and the slow lanes, basically saying they could charge certain websites more money to be in the fast lane. So when people go to that website, there's faster service, then you have them charging websites less money and they could be in the slow lanes. So that's why tech companies are against this, because you have, startups or small businesses who can't afford to be in the fast lane, to have their websites in the fast lane. And even Google, who could afford to be in the fast lane, let's say, is still against this because of the larger thing that it implies.
And what are the implications with regard to free speech? I mean, some are arguing that it is a free speech issue if they do repeal net neutrality. I mean, was this an issue prior to net neutrality being started, or is it just something that may be an issue in the future?
Right, yeah, it may be an issue in the future, and it's basically saying the internet service providers, people are saying they could become the gatekeepers of our information, because if they have packages where you have to pay, consumers have to pay to have access to certain websites, that's limiting the information they can receive. There's been protests around the country for this, and the public actually, regardless of party lines, is really in favor of net neutrality. A Political Morning Consult poll from over the summer, 60% of voters did support net neutrality in that poll.
And you're talking about those gates of access and ultimately these companies controlling the means by which you get your information. So what kind of pushback can we expect, not only from people within states and individuals, but also from other tech companies?
Yeah, there's we have independent groups that support the internet, such as the Internet Association Group, and they supported in 2015 when Obama put the net neutrality in place. they had they legally supported it. They put together, cohorts to support that. So you might see pushback from them. You also might see pushback from individual, more left-leaning states who might want to, take this to court, because basically what Ajit Pai said in his statement is that the states won't be able to create their own laws to kind of circumvent what the federal government is doing. They will have to comply.
Unfortunately, Gilat, I'm sorry. We're going to have to leave it there.
Yes,
Thanks so much for being here, though.
College Republicans and college Democrats are bringing D.C. policy issues to SU amid recent talk of tax reform and the budget. The two groups hosted their first ever debate in the Maxwell Auditorium last week. CitrusTV reporter Gabrielle Caracciolo is live in studio.
Thanks. Well, the Democrats and Republicans debated for just about 2.5 hours in front of a packed audience in Maxwell Auditorium. I attended the debate to see what topics were discussed. Teams of 3 members from SU's College Republicans and College Democrats faced off on 4 different topics at their inaugural debate, beginning with health care.
I'm willing, to own up to my party's shortcomings, and I hope that you all are willing to do the same, because the Affordable Care Act has been maybe the biggest domestic policy disaster of the last 20 years.
Democrats and other progressive thinkers alike believe in healthcare as a right, nothing more, nothing less.
After opening arguments from both sides, members of the audience were able to engage in the debate by asking questions that concern them to one or both parties.
Why don't we do training as well, mandated training, to make sure that people who get firearms actually know what they're doing with them?
And while many of the questions from the crowd were directed at the Republican side, moderator Grant Reher worked to keep the crowd under control and asked questions to clarify the arguments from both sides. Reher says it was great to see the clubs take the initiative to have the debate.
It's particularly gratifying, I think, to see something like this when political adversaries beyond this campus seem to have a hard time engaging each other constructively.
Former Democratic mayoral candidate Juanita Perez-Williams attended the event to support students that had volunteered on her campaign. She says she believes both sides debated well.
It brought the debate to a level where I thought people were really learning.
The clubs also debated the topics of Planned Parenthood funding and immigration.
Thanks, Gabrielle. The capital of Israel is on the move. Elijah Shama will have the full breakdown of that development after the break. Stay tuned.
Here we go. We're gonna go out there in the rain. You're gonna get wet. All right, here we go. Oh, okay, quick. Oh yeah, yes. So much fun. Mwah. So wet.
They said I have troll teeth.
That my voice sounded like a possessed baby doll.
That no one would ever love someone as stupid as me.
That I was fat, ugly.
Disgusting.
The effect of bullying is potent.
We will no longer be the silent majority.
Now, when you see online bullying, there's something you can do about it.
We're gonna take action with the I.
I am a witness. I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness.
I am a witness, and so are you.
The U.S. Embassy in Israel might need to start packing. According to sources close to the president, they're moving. It's reported President Trump will refuse to sign a waiver that keeps the embassy in Tel Aviv, instead moving it to the holy city of Jerusalem. Talking Points contributor Elijah Shama tells us Palestinians and Arab neighbors warn of devastating consequences following this potential move. He's here to speak with us tonight. Elijah, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, what is this exactly going to take for the Trump administration to make this move?
Not much, because Congress in 1995 actually passed a law basically saying that they want the U.S. to formally recognize the embassy in Jerusalem. But the president has signed a waiver every 6 months, keeping that from happening. And basically all Trump would have to do is stop signing that waiver, and this would happen.
So why is this politically advantageous? I think that's what everybody wants to know here.
I think this is kind of the U.S. doubling down on its support for Israel. Israel, a lot of the right-wing elements in the Israeli Knesset has kind of said that they want an undivided Jerusalem. They want their capital and they want it to kind of have no strings attached. And this would be a big move towards that goal.
And what about the Arab neighbors? I mean, what's been the reaction from other countries?
Jordan's foreign minister actually came out with a very strong tweet saying that he spoke to Rex Tillerson and basically said that if this were to happen, there would be devastating consequences. The Arab League recently called into effect an emergency meeting because of this and basically said the same thing, that if they do this, it will kill the Palestinian peace process.
But the UN still doesn't recognize Israel's sovereignty over Jerusalem. So how does that factor into this?
That is correct. There are actually no nations with embassies in Jerusalem. That's important to note. Most nations have, well, all of them have their embassies in Tel Aviv. The U.S. would be the first to move to Jerusalem, and the UN still doesn't recognize that Israel has this territory, and 75% of UN states favor Palestinian statehood. So that would be a big, big blow to kind of any reconciliation.
And Elijah, if we do see this move go through, could we see a new intifada?
I think we could. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called for kind of a day of rage on Wednesday if this were to happen. So we would see large-scale demonstrations, much like we saw in the Second Intifada, and continuing on through there. So I think violence is definitely not out of the picture if this were to happen, at least on some of the Palestinian side and a lot of their Arab neighbors.
Now, I mean, Elijah, this is definitely going to be groundbreaking if it does go through. It's definitely something we're going to be following. So thanks so much for being here. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
When we get back, I sat down with Syracuse iSchool professors to talk about the recent developments for Bitcoin. Stay with us.
What are you, superheroes?
Just four brothers who hate bullies and love this city. Gear up, guys.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes? B, console her?
Don't worry, sweetie. This is gonna happen a lot.
Or C, find her a new boyfriend?
Nice, single boys. That was weird.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Well, Thomas, you've got prediabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have prediabetes. Big time.
As of today, one Bitcoin is selling for over $11,000. That's 11 times what it was last year.
And while this recent surge from crypto commodity has been in the news lately, coverage of Michael Flynn and the tax plan have often received more attention.
Earlier today, I sat down with Syracuse professor Lee McKnight, who specializes in blockchain management, the technology that serves as a foundation for Bitcoin transactions. Take a listen to our conversation. Thanks so much for joining us, Professor McKnight. We just kind of wanted to get a better understanding of what Bitcoin actually is.
Bitcoin is well, it's called a virtual currency, but truly it's a virtual or digital commodity. So like gold or any other commodity, it can be traded and exchanged and has potentially has some value if people believe it has value and want to use it for something.
And do you think that that core capability is a reason why some of the interest has spiked and we've seen, you know, the stock share go upwards of 10,000 because there's such a peaked interest? Because given the first impressions of the currency, it's tough to figure out exactly why there's such a spike.
So here's my take on the spike in value. There is a fundamental new value in this innovative technology of distributed ledger or blockchain technology. That's absolute fact, in my opinion. It's still my opinion, but I think that's a fact. Many people can accept that. Now, but I don't think that's at all the reason for the excitement in Bitcoin. Bitcoin it's the brand. It's the first generation, so it's a representative of this fundamental capability, but it's not good at that. So it's really about branding and marketing of this new capability.
And given that it's that first generation, what do you think is next for this cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin?
It's not, so this is what I say, I'm being the academic professor here and pedantic. It's not really a cryptocurrency. That's a lie in naming. It's more a crypto commodity. It's a crypto commodity. And if people, and the way the system is set up, there will never be more than 20 million Bitcoins.
Is it a sustainable model for what it is and what it eventually will become?
Yeah, so this is where I've been asked this question a lot lately, and I'm saying you could, with this price going up like this, you could say, gee, this looks like the classic bubble and it has to crash. And say, well, yes, you have this S-curve up, but what I don't know is if you can't really predict whether it's going to go up another 10 times from this, or whether it's going to turn here when more and more people understand that, one, Bitcoin isn't really a virtual currency, two, you can't really use it very well for transactions. Right now, it's the enthusiasm, when it's where the smell of the bubble is when mom and pop and grandma, everybody's saying, gee, I see this thing going up crazy, I want to get in. None of all those people are speculators and don't really understand anything about the technology, don't really know about it, but they just see the market trends. So that's driving it up further, and that could drive it, honestly, there's a lot more mom and pops than there are experts in, blockchain technology out there. So this could go up another 10 times. I'm not predicting that, but you can't yet, it's too early to really say which way this goes.
Josh and I will have the stories we're looking ahead to after the break. We'll be right back.
This is the story of a boy who didn't talk for a long time. The boy liked things to always be the same. Any changes would scare and upset him. The unknown was an unfriendly place. The boy was very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where they couldn't get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. He wasn't trying to be mean, it just made him feel uncomfortable. Sometimes he would flap his arms again and again.
One day, I found out I have something called autism. My family got me help. Slowly, I found my voice and learned all the ways I could live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
This time next week, the United States government could be shut down. To prevent that from happening, a bill was brought to the floor Saturday that would extend the funding deadline another 2 weeks. The stopgap funding measure keeps the government funded at existing levels until the new deadline. The concern for conservatives is that they want to cut a quick deal and go home. But Democrats are vowing that they will not vote if immigration protections for dreamers are not included. It'll be interesting to see how conservatives can pass off the outcomes of budget season to their base and to see how Democrats respond. I'll be looking ahead to not only how the two parties' goals fare in these discussions, but more importantly, if Congress can avoid a government shutdown just before Christmas.
And nearly 1 month ago, a mass shooting at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, killed 26 people. Shortly after, we learned that the shooter was able to legally purchase his guns, despite a conviction for domestic violence. Had the Air Force reported the 2012 assault against the killer's wife and stepson, he would have been prevented from legally purchasing the gun. In response, on November 15th, a bipartisan group of senators introduced the Fix NICS Act in an attempt to improve the National Instant Criminal Background Check system. Now, this past Wednesday, the House took their own step in passing the bill, approving it by a 17-6 bipartisan vote in the House Judiciary Committee. And while a modest fix, this bill is one of the first steps in bipartisan efforts to curb the nation's gun problem. With still a long way to go, I'm looking ahead to other joint efforts. And now that is all the time we have for tonight, but before we end here, I just want to take time to thank our wonderful executive producer, Tom Austen. This is his last show, and we just consider ourselves so lucky to have worked with him.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure working with Tom. We're also going to miss all of our correspondents who are going abroad, as they will be missed and leaving us for a semester.
And for Talking Points, I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney.
Good night.